Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Burial at Sea 1999 mode video walkthrough. This is chapter 2 entitled Market Street, and this is the Bioshock Infinite DLC for all intents and purposes. And I think it's great. The first area here, Market Street, what we're going to be navigating for the next 10 minutes, is a very rich and interesting version of Rapture, because it's set before the events that you played in the very first Bioshock, but there's still been some of the, the friction between Fontaine and Ryan and all those good things, and it's a nice piece of exposition to teach you of, just further deepening that rich fiction that Bioshock has. And this time it's in a completely new context because of the lighthouses, because of the the ending and what have you, that I'm not going to go into too much detail, just in case you haven't played Bioshock Infinite, which you should, because it's a great game. But this first area is a rich environment. It's filled with people, it's filled with dialogue, it's filled with shops, it's filled with nice animations, just rich little moments. It's dense, and it's dense in a piece of DLC that I believe the people that have a problem with its length are the people that powered through it. Because, I spent a good, 4 hours playing, maybe? 4 hours playing, give or take, my first playthrough. The recording, I've got to admit, only took me 2. But there's a good reason for that, because on this particular recording, I am not going to be doing everything. And on my first playthrough, I did. I went everywhere I could. I tried to find everything I could. I explored. And I did the whole, this is a new thing, I'm going to enjoy every aspect of it that I can. This walkthrough, however, is not going to be that. For instance, you're not going to see me walk around Market Street and go in all the shops and pick up all the money and all that other good stuff. I'm literally going to go to Cohen's building here. It's going to tell us to find a mask, one of the Masquerade masks, to get in, and then you have to look in 3 shops to find the mask. And the system works pretty simply. Whichever shop you go to last is the one that has the mask, because it wants to give you these little moments, these little quips between Elizabeth and NPCs, and it kind of enriches the fiction, enriches, the relationship, and it's a storytelling mechanic. It's a device that delivers plot and nothing more. So you can't speed this up, there's no specific one, you just have to do it, but it's really enjoyable, so it's not like it's going to be a chore or a bore or anything of that nature. I came in here because I don't think I went in that store my first time through this area. But that's not where you need to go. It wants you to go into the Golden Rule, it wants you to go into a music store, and it wants you to go into a diamond store, I think. And if you're playing on 1999 mode like I am, you can't press up on the D-pad, sorry, to show you the guiding mark that tells you where you need to go. So it does make it a little trickier as far as that is concerned. Also, the other difficulty adjustments apply. If you run out of money, it will boot you to the loading screen, and when you load back into the game, you'll reload wherever your last checkpoint was. And I have to say, guys, that the checkpoints on this DLC are lacking, to say the best, to say the least, sorry. They're shit, in fact, they really are. Like, you can do entire rooms filled with bad guys, you can go through 2 quiet sections, looting everything, picking things up, finding keys, lockpicks, opening doors, and then you get to the next sequence, you die, and before you did any of the previous stuff, or the previous fight or anything, so the checkpoints are pretty shitty. Let's find another shot. But hopefully you'll not be having any issue with them if you're using the guide, and you'll be able to get through this quite simply. I didn't have any trouble on this recording, except for with the Big Daddy. On my first play, I've just spoiled something. If you don't, if you didn't want spoilers, unfortunately, this is a guide. That's what happens. The final boss of this DLC is a Big Daddy. It's kind of predictable and kind of awesome, and it's pretty tricky too. But on my first run through, I managed to get him distracted by the motorized Patriot, and if you do that, he'll not even attack you, and you can just kind of pound him in the back and hit him with everything you've got, and he's very, very easy. But for some reason, on my first attempt when I was recording, he wouldn't focus on the Patriot, he kept focusing on me, and it just got to that point where I was low on life, and he ended up doing a move where he does a ground attack, and I was miles away from him, I couldn't even see him, and I just kind of keened over and died. So you need to be really careful. The run that I get on this particular guide, when I beat him, is a pretty fun one. The big difference I noticed is, because I'm not going to be using or traversing all the areas and picking up all the gear, I'm not going to get the ability to use Winter's Shield on skyhooks. And if anybody doesn't know what Winter's Shield is, it's the ability to get invulnerability periods when you get on and off a skyhook. And on my guide for Bioshock Infinite, if you've not seen it, it's in my playlists. I use the skyhooks a lot because they're my favourite part of these games. So I'm a big skyhook fan, and I was on and off him like a psychopath getting those iframes which would allow me to beat him up, and when I was coming out of the invulnerability I would get back on and it would reset and things. And it was a really good and effective strategy of stopping him from damaging me when I was weak and letting me regen and things. I didn't pick that thing up on this guide, so I'm going to be doing it without the skyhooks. And if you're wondering why I'm not using them against the boss, it's literally because of that reason. The Big Daddy has the same ability that the handymen do, only it's a stranger one, where when you are on a skyhook, they can somehow get you off it and it damages you, and I'm not entirely too sure how that works, because I never saw the Big Daddy do it, I just ended up falling off. And we all know when you're on a skyhook, you're pretty much safe unless you decide to get off, so that's definitely a barrier of progress right there. He just kicks you off the damn line. But it's a bouncer if you Bioshock Big Daddy lingo's up to scratch, which is the one with the big drill. He's a very physical guy. He's got his charge attack, which you can actually strafe around on this one. I don't think you could do that on the original Bioshock, because the very first bouncer on Bioshock, who is optional, is the hardest part of that game if you ever played it on hard with, you know, none of the vital machines on. What are they called? Vital chambers, I think they're called.
So who is this fellow Cohen?
But we're now moving towards Sander Cohen. The rest of this is pretty expositional, guys, till we get into the meat of the game. A lot of good art direction on this part. I enjoyed the colours, I enjoyed just the environments, the contrast, and anybody who's played the original Bioshock will enjoy these moments with Sander, because he's a character who returns. This is, you know, before those events when he was totally fucked up in Fort Frolic, and he's still pretty crazy. So, a lot of fun to be had. But this DLC is quite challenging on 1999 mode, because it doesn't play like Bioshock Infinite. And I couldn't get my finger on what the problem was, and now I know. What they've done in this game, on the main game, you can only carry 2 weapons. 2 weapons, pick and choose, they're what you've got to use. You know, if you want to get something different, you have to swap out what you're carrying. It's a very Halo reminiscent system, and reminiscent of a lot of modern shooters. And I was not a big fan of it, as I trim out a big dialogue piece just there. Never a fan of it at all, because on the original Bioshocks there was a weapon wheel. Well, in this DLC they've brought back the weapon wheel, but they've brought it back with a cost, and the cost I don't like. So, on the main game you can carry a respectable amount of ammunition. For instance, your carbine carries about 80 rounds in its clip, and is it like 20 rounds in its magazine? Your shotgun carries a ton more, you know. Every single gun, the hand cannon carries, give or take, about 18 rounds. On this DLC, every weapon carries 1/3, or like 1/4 of what they would normally carry, because you can swap between a ton of them and carry them all at once. And it doesn't sound like much of a problem, but on 1999 mode, the enemies take so much damage to die that I actually found myself without any ammo a whole bunch of times. On my first playthrough, I was struggling, guys. I was getting my ass kicked a lot, because there was 5 or 6 splicers attacking me, and I didn't have any bullets, so I had to beat them up. And the fighting mechanics on this game are not terrible, but they're nowhere near as precise to, you know, get in and get out without taking damage, because it's not really designed for that kind of play. And there's a lot of traps that you can use. There's a lot of, you know, turrets you can use your Vigors on, I think they're called. But you don't have much salt, you don't have all that much ammunition. It was a tough learning curve getting back into the rhythm. And the big thing is, on Bioshock Infinite, the enemies kind of stay at distance and shoot at you. If they've got a shotgun or they're a specific type, they'll rush you. But for the most, they'll play it like a shooter, so you can play it like a shooter using cover, popping out, taking them out, you know, moving forward slowly, cover to cover, and deal with things like that. Use the skyhooks. In this they don't. The splicers are erratic and crazy. They just rush you. All they do is rush you. And the shooting mechanics on this game are fine. You know, they're fine in respect to the game. But when you compare them to something like a Call of Duty, they feel very loose. And you notice this when the gameplay goes up close, because the aiming can be very difficult. And it makes the game pretty challenging if you're approaching it from a Bioshock Infinite perspective. So, hopefully this video will help anybody who wants to take on the higher challenge and who's struggling and they're on YouTube scouting for some techniques and tips. But I think you're in for a bit of a shock with some of the stuff they've introduced, because it definitely ramps the difficulty up, and I wasn't expecting it, and unfortunately I don't think it's a good difficulty. I think it's a difficulty that's kind of forced and not as fun as Bioshock Infinite, but I'll definitely talk about that on the coming videos when hopefully we have something to do. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.